Hello students, I'm going to talk about structure of atom in this video. I will explain to you the introduction part of it, what were the events that led to the proposition of different atomic models. As you have studied about structure of atom in class 9th also, and you have little bit knowledge about the introduction part of the chapter. So there were many attempts made by different scientists towards the proposition of atomic model. But the very first recognition was given to Dalton's atomic model. And one of the main points of Dalton's atomic model was that an atom is indivisible. It cannot be broken into different parts. And that's the word atom was used. Atomos means in Greek uncut. But there were many discoveries in the early and the late 19th century that simply discarded this thought of Dalton that atom was indivisible. So the first experiment was performed by Michael Faraday on cathode ray tube, which he called discharge tube. What is a discharge tube? A discharge tube is a hard glass tube, and it has got two electrodes, positive and negative, connected to a high tension battery. I have drawn a diagram here. Look here. Just look at the diagram. This is a rough sketch of an evacuated glass tube. I have used the word evacuated. What does it mean? You can see over here that I have shown an opening on the top of the tube which is connected to a vacuum pump. Now, what is the reason of connecting it to the vacuum pump? You must have observed during lightning that a heavy charge flows from clouds to the earth. But you have also studied that air is a poor conductor of electricity. Then how is that electric heavy charge flows from clouds to earth if air is a poor conductor of electricity? Yeah, it is true that air is a poor conductor of electricity. If I have a naked wire in front of you and if I connect it to the switch, you won't get electric shock because the medium in between you and the electric current is air. And since electric current cannot transmit through air, we say that air is insulator. But under two conditions, air can even become conductor of current. And those two conditions are extremely low atmospheric pressure and high voltage. So that is why you can see that we have got two arrangements over here. One is the vacuum pump, which will suck out air or the gas which is taken, which is present in the evacuated glass tube. Now we will suck out, and under the range of 10 to the power minus 6 atmosphere, it was found that the gas which was taken in the discharge tube was conducting. And then you can see that we have got two electrodes, positive and negative, and they are connected to the high tension battery. High tension battery is one that supplies high voltage. As I told you that under two conditions even air can become conducting. Air is a mixture of gases. So the two conditions are high voltage and low pressure. So the high tension batteries supplies voltage to the electrodes. The electrode which is connected to the positive terminal is anode, and the one which is connected to the negative terminal is cathode. There were many scientists who have performed the experiment on discharge tube. To begin with, as I told you, Michael Faraday, then we had William Crookes, but the credit for the discovery of electron goes to J.J. Thomson. So this was the experimental setup, and when current was passed through evacuated discharge tube, it was observed that some invisible rays were emerging from cathode and they were traveling straight to the anode. So how can you say that they were traveling straight? Because these rays are invisible. If you place some material in between here, if you place some material in between the cathode and anode, it was found that the rays which were emerging from the cathode, they could cast shadow. And when it was the later end of the discharge tube was coated with a fluorescent material, now these cathode rays were producing they were producing a spark over here. It started glowing when cathode rays were striking against the wall behind the anode. So these observations showed that the particles were emerging from cathode and they were traveling in a straight line. J.J. Thomson, he made certain changes in the experiment setup. He took different gases in the discharge tube and he made cathode or the electrodes with different materials. But when he changed the material of the cathode or when he changed the nature of the gas, he found the same result in all the cases. So this showed that the rays which were emerging from the cathode were independent of the nature of the material of the cathode and the gas taken. And since these particles were negatively charged, now how can we say that they were negatively charged? When these particles were subjected to electric and magnetic field, they were showing deflection towards the positive terminal. If you place some electric field in between them, then these particles, suppose you have placed an electric field over here. This is the positive plate and this is the negative plate. If you place it, now these particles which were traveling straight, they were now deflected towards the positive plate. So deflection towards the positive plate showed that these particles are negatively charged. And upon passing the electric discharge through the gases were getting ionized, and when this ionized gases strike against the cathode, they were able to scrap the electron from the material of the cathode. It was like taking away electron from the material of the cathode. So these observations showed that every substance is made up of these tiny particles which were negatively charged, and J.J. Thomson called this particle electron. And since upon taking different materials for the cathode, the nature of the particles remained the same, it showed that every substance or every whatever substance were known to them, every element, they were made up of these negatively charged particles and they were common in all, which he called them as electron. The next experiment is to find out the charge upon mass ratio. This is a cathode ray tube. This was discharge ray tube. Now I have drawn over here a cathode ray tube. Now you can see the experimental setup. We have got a cathode. The cathode is negatively charged. As you can see over here, I have connected to the negative end of the battery. And this is the anode having a small hole in between. This is a small hole in between the anode. And anode is the positive terminal. It is connected to the positive end of the battery, terminal of the battery. So upon connecting cathode to the negative terminal and when we switch on the current, electrons are emitted from cathode. And these emitted electrons, since we have got an anode over here, the purpose of using anode is to accelerate the electron. That means these electrons produced will be attracted towards the anode and the speed of the anode electron will increase. And since we have got a small hole over here, this hole will help us to form a small beam of fast accelerating electron. It will form a beam of fast accelerating electron, and these beam were subjected to electric and magnetic field which were perpendicular to the direction of propagation of electron and also perpendicular to each other. Just you can imagine if we have got electric plates like this placed horizontally like this, and then we have got a magnetic field placed like this. So electric field this way and magnetic field this way. So you can see that this is the positive plate and this one is the negative plate of the electric field. Then we have got a horseshoe magnet, the north pole and the south pole. So this is the north pole and this is the south pole. This is the experimental setup of the apparatus. Okay. Now, in the absence of any field, in absence of both electric and magnetic field, these fast moving electrons would strike at point B. Now we have got a screen which is coated with fluorescent material. Now what is the purpose of coating it with fluorescent material? That when electrons will strike against the screen, it will produce light. So we will come to know that at which place the electrons are striking. So in the absence of any electric and magnetic field, the electron beams were striking at position B. In presence of only electric field, they were deflected towards point A. In the presence of only magnetic field, they were deflected towards point C. So now, but what J.J. Thomson did was, he balanced the electric and magnetic field in such a way that in spite of presence of electric and magnetic field, the electrons would strike at position B. That means the strength of electric and magnetic field was balanced in such a way that in spite of their presence, the electron would strike at position B only. Now you have to keep in mind that what are the factors upon which the deflection of electron would depend. So deflection of electron would depend upon the strength of magnetic and electric field. Stronger the electric field, more the deflection. Stronger the magnetic field, more the deflection, and vice versa. The deflection also depends upon the mass of the particle. If you have got a heavy particle, deflection will be lesser. If you have got a light particle, deflection will be more. It's same like if you spread out hanky and a bedsheet outside your home for drying, and if there is a storm or wind, anything of this, hanky will be deflected to far away place and the bedsheet will not be able to deflect for too large distance. The reason is the mass. If a particle is heavy, the deflection in both electric and magnetic field will be smaller. But if the particle is light, deflection will be large. So deflection is indirectly proportional to the mass of the particle, and it is directly proportional to the strength of electric and magnetic field. So by calculating deflection in electric and magnetic field, J.J. Thomson was able to calculate the charge upon mass ratio of the electron. He was able to calculate the charge upon mass ratio of the electron, and that was nearly 1.75 into 10 to the power 11 coulomb per kg. He was able to calculate this value. So we are not going to go into much detail of this, that how these calculations were made. You only have to understand that what the experimental setup was and on what way he was able to calculate these values, the charge upon mass ratio of the electron. Now we are going to discuss the next point. I hope this part is clear to you. Now I will be discussing you the development of proton. What led to the discovery, the proper word would be discovery. What led to the discovery of proton? Goldstein is the scientist who has been given credit for the discovery of proton. To the same experimental setup of discharge tube, Goldstein, he changed the different gases and studied the nature of the particle emitted. When he had taken a perforated cathode is one which has got holes. Instead of taking a solid cathode, he took a cathode in which there were tiny holes in it. He replaced cathode with a perforated cathode, and by changing the gases taken in the discharge tube, he found that there were certain particles besides cathode rays that were emerging from anode, and they traveled opposite to the cathode. That means they were emerging from the positive electrode and were traveling to the negative electrode. And the nature of these particles, it kept on changing when the nature of the gas was, when different gases were taken in the discharge tube. But the lightest and the smallest positive charge was observed when hydrogen gas was taken in the discharge tube. So when hydrogen gas was taken in the discharge tube, the particles that emerged were lightest and smallest. So it was named as proton. You know that a hydrogen atom, this is the structure of the atom that you have studied in class 9th. You know that the hydrogen atom is made up of one proton and one electron. So when hydrogen gas was taken in the discharge tube and when electric discharge or current was passed through it, this hydrogen gas got ionized. That means whatever electron was present in it, it was scrapped out of it, and what was remaining was only a proton in the nucleus. So since this was the lightest and the smallest positive charge, it was named a proton. So proton is also, H plus ion is also known as proton. Okay. This led to the discovery of electron and proton and discarded the theory proposed by Dalton that atom was indivisible. Now the next question was, if electrons are present, if protons are present, then what is the arrangement in an atom? How are these subatomic particles arranged in that atom? Again, there were many theories which were proposed, but the very first theory that got the credit was J.J. Thomson's plum pudding model. Now J.J. Thomson's plum pudding model says that an atom has got a positive core. It is like a watermelon, in which the red part represents the positive charge and the seeds in the watermelon represents the electron. So you can simply compare it with the watermelon. Otherwise, Thomson's model was also known as plum pudding model, in which he said that the core is the pudding. The pudding represents the core, which is positively charged, and the raisins in it are the electrons which are embedded in the positive core. So this was J.J. Thomson's plum pudding model. But after Rutherford's gold foil experiment, alpha particle gold foil scattering experiment, Thomson's model was discarded. This also you have studied in class 9th. What is Rutherford's gold foil experiment? In Rutherford's gold foil experiment, he had taken a radioactive substance which emitted. This radioactive substance was kept in a lead box. Why it was taken in a lead box? Because lead could absorb alpha particles. So those workers, those people who are working in a nuclear reactor, you know that nuclear reactor is a plant, is a place where electricity is generated through a nuclear reaction. And these people, they wear protective coating like PPE, you have it nowadays, is the more common term. Their protective coating has got lining of lead on their clothes. Lead. So lead has got the property of absorbing the radiation. So Rutherford had taken a lead box, and in this lead box he had taken a radioactive substance which could emit alpha particles. Then we have got a wall of lead through a small slit in between. Slit means it was a small hole in between. And the purpose of this small hole was to form a thin beam of alpha particles. Now the alpha particles which were emitted from here could pass through this small hole and a beam of alpha particle was formed. Now there a thin gold foil was taken. Why gold was chosen? The reason is that gold is highly malleable metal and a very thin layer of it could be formed. So which is known as a foil. A thin foil of gold was taken, and this gold foil was surrounded with a screen having zinc sulfide coating on it. This is a screen and it is having zinc sulfide coating on it. The purpose of having this zinc sulfide coating is that zinc sulfide produces scintillation when protons strike against it, or alpha particle, sorry, it would be alpha particle, not the proton which strikes against it. Now what is an alpha particle? Alpha particle is doubly ionized helium ion. So helium ion doubly ionized means 2. You know that helium, what is helium? The next element in the periodic table is helium after hydrogen. So helium has got 2 electrons and 2 protons. Okay. So when we remove these 2 electrons from it, it will have a plus 2 unit of charge on it, and it is known as doubly ionized helium ion, and this is what an alpha particle is. So alpha particle was taken and it was made to strike against the gold foil, and gold foil was surrounded with a screen having zinc sulfide coating on it, which could produce scintillation. Scintillation is the word. Scintillation upon striking, that means spark is produced when alpha particles will be striking against the screen. So what were the observations? He observed that most of the alpha particle pass straight through the screen, through the gold foil, and since they pass straight through the gold foil, most of them, very few alpha particles, they suffered small angle deflection. They were deflected by small angle like this. Very few, and very few, 1 in 12,000, they bounced back. They nearly bounced back. So what was the reason? How did he explain this observation? He said that since most of the alpha particle pass straight and scintillation, a very heavy scintillation was produced on this part. So it shows that most part of an atom is empty. The second observation, that it deflected through small angle, and then the third one, that it very 1 in 12,000 bounced back. So this bouncing back shows that there in the atom there is a massive part which is positively charged, and this massive part occupies a very small volume. So he proposed the model known as planetary model, in which he said that the major part of the atom is empty and there is a positive core in the atom which is quite massive, means quite heavy, and this massive core occupies a very small volume. It's like a cricket ball in a cricket stadium. So, and the electrons revolve round this massive part, which he called nucleus, in the same way as planets revolve round the sun. But again, there was a problem related to this atomic model. According to classical physics, an accelerated charge emits radiation, electromagnetic radiation. So you can see that when electron is revolving round the nucleus, so at every moment of time its direction is changing. So on account of change in direction, the particle is accelerated. You know that acceleration is on account of magnitude and direction both. So at every moment of time, its direction is changing and is undergoing acceleration. And since an electron is a charged particle, it should continuously emit radiation. And if it is emitting radiation, that means it is losing energy continuously, and very soon this electron should fall into the nucleus because of decreasing radius. That means atom was destructible. This led to the end of an atom. An atom can neither be created nor be destroyed. So on account of this atomic model was discarded. Now you can say that, then why is that planets don't lose energy when they are revolving around the sun? Because even their direction is changing continuously. But the answer is that planets are non-charged particles. They are not having any charge, but electron is a charged particle. So this theory is not applicable to planets, but is applicable to electron. Thank you, and that's all for today. In my next video, I will be explaining the next part of the chapter.